Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a reminisce to society.
Then so shall you be. Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome back to Menace to Society. I'm thrilled today to speak to an old friend of mine. I haven't actually spoken with him. It's been over 20 years, I would imagine. Please welcome to the podcast my good friend from a long time ago, now living out in California where he's got his own podcast. Please welcome Paul Sullivan, Sully, to the show.
Hey, it's funny. You mentioned it's been over a decade, probably almost 20 years since you and I've seen. And that seems so bizarre to me, because then I have to ask myself, how the hell old am I now? And you and I look eerily similar to when we first met, so like we kind of look the same. And I've kept track of you and your career and everything. And I know we've kept in touch via social media and everything. Mm-hmm. And then you stop and you say, oh, wait a minute, I moved from New York in 2005. And that's nearly 15 years ago right there.
It's crazy. It just creeps by.
I know. And I sometimes have to remember, Jesus, I'm in my mid-40s, closer to 50 than I care to admit right now. I still have my hair on my head, and that's cool. But it's been a while. I'll tell you something. That this is one reason that I feel like you and I have been in contact a lot more recently is the way that my iPhone is set up. Sometimes, like if I attach it to like a rental car, I've had more rental cars in the last few years than I care to admit. And sometimes when I plug my phone into the port there, it starts playing my songs that I have on my iTunes in alphabetical order. Uh-huh. And it will play the Who song, A Quick One, While She Was Away first. And so a bunch of times it's just playing that song. And then it goes right into All I Wanted Was a Sunday from Use This Against Me by Lisa Landry. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I've heard your All I Want Is a Sunday screaming into the fast food drive-thru. That wonderful. It's a wonderful piece of stand-up of you being high, talking to the little drive-in box, trying to negotiate for a Sunday. And I think I've heard that's one of my most played tracks I have on my phone.
I'm sorry.
But sadly, that's how I think you are all the time. Is just driving around from Jack in the Box to Burger King's, having philosophical conversations with the drive-in box.
Yes, I do more with my life.
Yes.
What was that? That was a nice bell to acknowledge that I've got more going on.
Yeah, well, it's a thing that anytime you say something really true, I have an app that goes, so it confirms what you're saying is right.
A drive-through angel just got her wings.
That's right. You and I met. I'm gonna say 98, probably.
Sounds about.
I'm going to say it was probably at the Gotham Comedy Club open mic. At least that's where I first remembered you. You and I may have met somewhere else before that, but I first remembered you. And like you and like Danny Cohen and all those, what I used to call the Gotham Mafia. And I used to host the open mic there. And for those of you, this is an open mic in the late 90s.
So different.
YouTube.
So different.
Yeah, before YouTube, and so you had loonies who now would be doing YouTube channels, would be going up at open mics. We had some very talented people. Obviously, you were there. You're a very talented person.
Thank you.
And there was, Eric Kirchberger, and a bunch of people went on to become very successful TV writers.
Yeah.
CeCe Pleasance was there a lot, and I hosted it. And I think because they knew that I was smart enough not to do time in between the sets at an open mic. And it was an open mic that started at 4 in the afternoon.
4 o'clock.
4 in the fucking afternoon.
Yep.
And so who was there? Out-of-work actors and people who were getting some sort of disability check from the state of New York. And people like you and me who are just loons trying to see if we can pry loose a life in comedy. And every week there, I used to love doing that. And every week you would see some good people
Mm-hmm.
trying out stuff. It was like going to the gym. It was like, let's try out some new stuff. And every week there would be someone who would come up to me and say, this is my first time ever getting on stage. And I'd say, well, welcome. Congratulations. It's a long journey. And then you'd get the occasional a-hole who would be like, hey, I need more than 5 minutes. And I said, well, that's all you're getting is 5 minutes. So I got a lot more than 5 minutes. And I would just say, no, you don't. I swear, if this is your first open mic, trust me, if you have 5 minutes, God bless you. But that was great. And tell me if I'm wrong, I have a memory of you specifically, Lisa, wearing like a hat that had like a leopard print on it. Am I imagining that?
Oh, that was a winter hat that I used to have. Yeah, I got that in Baltimore. I remember that.
Yeah.
I
think I took a bunch of pictures like at the Christmas party or something like that. You know what? I'll see if I can dig that up. If I dig that up, I'll forward that to you. Or maybe I don't know what, but I just remembered you were hugging someone. It may have been Danny.
I think it was Danny, yeah.
Yeah. So I had this memory of that hat and you pulling off that hat.
How wild. Those were such fun days. We had a lot of people at those mics. There were like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed like there were 50, 40 people some weeks. Am I wrong?
There was always about 20 people there, and it always felt like more.
Because we were larger than life personalities.
but there was also there would have to be a cutoff because we only had the space from 4 to 6 because at 6 they had to start. All the waitresses would start to come in and clean up to get ready for the 7:30 show. So we had to be done at like 6:01. There was no like, someone's doing a guest spot. So there would be times there would be 30 or 40 people trying to get in there, but we really could only realistically put about 20 people on stage. So, and there would be people who would be pissed, or people would be like, hey, I was a little late because it's 4 PM. I have a job. But so the top priorities were for these. There's a couple of people there who were really creepy. I mean, I don't know if you remember. There were some dudes there, and believe me, this was way before any Me Too movement. There were people who would go up there and just talk about, I mean, beyond just talking about jerking off, like wanting to jerk off to specific other comics and talking about like, this bitch did this to me, and I'll rape someone. I remember someone saying, if I don't get laid soon, I'll rape someone if I don't get laid soon. They're like, wow, there's some holes in that joke. I don't think that's TV ready.
Also, there's no HR department in comedy, so do what thou wilt.
and I'll be honest, I wonder, and I probably was not the most PC person in the world too. I'm sure I did some things. I'm sure I was overly flirty with some people. And in fact, when a lot of the stuff over the last couple of years was starting to, explode, especially about comedy and Louis C.K. and all that, I really started, doing some internal reflections. Like, okay, I never forced someone to watch me tug in a hotel room, but there's a gray area between being a perfect human being and blocking the door so Rebecca Corey can't get out of the room while you jerk. Yeah. And I really started thinking, how many times did I fall into that gray area?
I don't know. I never had a weird experience with you. I never once remember having a weird experience. And I don't ever remember you having a reputation for that. There were certain guys that we all knew to stay away from, and you weren't one of them, if it helps.
Oh, off the air, you're going to tell me who they were. But I will tell you, there were 3 women that I specifically reached out to that I said, hey, was I too forward? And one of them was actually gone on to become pretty successful. I'll tell you who it was off when we stopped recording, because it's not. She's not on here to tell her son.
Yeah, we don't want to gossip. Like, yeah,
but she's a comedian who was a friend of mine who I had a big crush on, and I made a move on her. And at first, she kind of gave me a little bit of a Heisman, and I still kept going in for the kiss. And I wrote to her like 2 years ago, and we're still Facebook friends and everything. I wrote to her and I said, like, hey, I'm sorry I did that. That was not cool. And she was like, I have no memory of that at all. Like,
Aww.
okay, fine. One of them was like, yeah, just don't worry about it. Yeah, you tried to, you went in, you tried to be, you were a little forward, but it's all right. It wasn't like you weren't blocking the door masturbating. I said, okay, yes, I was not blocking the door masturbating. And one woman was like, yeah, I do remember that. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it, but I'm glad you're apologizing. And I was like, okay, cool. I just wanted to, clear the air, because I don't, I hate to say this, but sometimes you look at you and go like, I probably was kind of shitty, And I think back at some of the comedy bits I did, and some of the stuff I did some of it was homophobic in retrospect.
What was the 90s, though? It was the 90s. Not to say that it's good to be out there with homophobic material, but I think things have changed so drastically in the past 20 years. We're all more sensitive about this. Yeah, they should. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I have no patience for is I have no patience for people saying that that's destroying comedy. I say bullshit. That's making it better. It makes it better if your comedy is based on putting down an entire group. Then it's shitty comedy.
Yeah.
Then you're doing a minstrel show. If it forces you to actually come up with something clever and good, then that's a positive thing.
Oh my gosh, you mean like work for it?
Yeah. and believe me, I'm not like a prude who's like, I don't want to hear swearing and everything like that. But I sometimes like seeing comedy where there are, you can't say the Carlin 7 words. How can you tell that dirty joke without saying, and then I put my balls in her mouth? Like, how can you do it where you can actually have to put your back into it? And I mean, I'm going to sound like a real old fart right now, but I still think the funniest person who's ever lived on the planet is Groucho Marx, who never fails to make me laugh hysterically. And if you ever see him when he did his show, You Bet Your Life, and he was dirty as hell on that show.
Yeah. And
yet never said dick, never said fuck, and would do stuff that was like he was making boner jokes. And of course they were all censored, but God bless whoever edited them. There were all these gag reels of him, of all the stuff that had to be edited out of him basically being dirty on the show. And that still exists, which I think are some of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
Well, it seems like people were more, I don't know if the word is patient or the fact that this hadn't really been done yet. Maybe it was a different thing because it was so new, the whole idea of this TV medium and comedy back then. But also, I don't think audiences are so interested in nuance any longer and double entendre. They just want the actual punchline I don't know.
I think that there's a lot of room for both. I do think I will say that the audiences for comedy now is becoming quite sophisticated because there's so much content out there that obviously not all of it's going to be dick and balls. I got to tell you about I'm going to talk about me. My favorite topic in the world is about Paul Sullivan.
Sully!
I'm so interesting. But I think about my comedy career. I could not have aimed for a worse period of time to try to do comedy than exactly when I was doing it. I came into comedy in the mid-90s just as the comedy boom ended. And when I got out of doing stand-up because I was raising a family and having a job, and there was not enough hours in the day to go to comedy clubs at night as well, was just right around the time the Netflix explosion was starting. So it was like I could not have aimed for a worse period of time to put all of my energy into stand-up comedy. And I was an okay comic. I was never, you could tell who the really good ones were. I mean, as a baseball fan, you could tell who the starters were. You could tell who the stars were. And I could hold my own at Luna Lounge, or some other, or at Gotham, or at Caroline's whenever I went on. Mm-hmm. No one said, who's that schmuck? What is he doing on the stage? I did okay. I had some good jokes. I got some laughs. But then when you would see, someone go up and you see Judy Gold go up there and demolish, or
She's
you would go
great.
up there and you go up there and see, Todd Barry, or you'd see some people in our group, like, when I started seeing, like, Aaron Foley or Dana Eagle starting to really kill it.
Aaron Foley is phenomenal. I haven't seen Dana Eagle in years, but I love Aaron Foley's stuff because, like you said, she's clean. That's hard to do, and she's brilliant.
She's brilliant, and she commands the stage. I've seen her perform many times, and Aaron and I are still, because we're both rabid baseball fans. we talk often, but you know, you could tell when you're on a bill and someone's just, you know, you're like, I was getting good solid hits, and someone just starts hitting homer after homer. You're like going like, wow, that's amazing. So I was a decent comic, but I wasn't so great that that stardom was beckoning. I used to say I sampled from the creative buffet, that I did stand-up comedy, and I was good enough to be a stand-up comic and get paid for it. I dabbled in acting. I appeared in a couple of TV shows. I was in one episode of Monk. I've been in a couple other things. But you know, I was never a great actor. But I got a SAG card for my troubles. You know, I could get auditions. I got booked every once in a while. You know, I was a TV producer. I produced on The Daily Show. I produced on Bonnie Hunt's show. I produced on X-Men. I produced on some nationally broadcast shows. And I got an Emmy nomination for my troubles. But I was never going to run a show. And I've written for magazines. I directed a feature film that got played in festivals, got a tiny release. So like, I did a lot of things that I could say, yeah, I did that. I was able to be good enough at it to reach this level. But there was never one thing that I just broke through on and suddenly became, oh my God, you're super successful at that. And, you know, and I kind of like what happened with my life creatively, because I never have to wonder, could I do A, B, or C? But I do wonder if I focused on one, if I would have, like, instead of trying to just focus on being a TV producer, just focus on doing this, would there have been the tidal wave of success? And I don't know. I like looking back and saying, I did all these different things, and I held my own with all of them. So.
Well, it's a lot to accomplish, Paul. But I know that you're working on different stuff now.
Yeah. I got tired of the entertainment industry. I still was getting TV producing jobs, but I didn't like the shows I was working on. And for a while, I started making videos in the tech world because they paid better. And I said, well, if I'm going to do something for the dough, I might as well do it from a lot more dough than I was making doing some, you know, reality TV show that I wouldn't watch if I was strapped down like a Clockwork Orange. and, you know, and I mean, some of the shows I worked on, and some of them were successful and multiple seasons and everything, but I didn't like the shows. And if you want to know what shows they are, look at my IMDb page. There, you can see some of them there. And you know, I mean, I worked on them. The checks cleared, but you know, did you watch the show? No, I didn't. No, I watched the ending to see if I was in the credits.
Right.
Did I get credit? Yep, there I am.
I watched my mailbox for the check.
Yeah, and the check's all cleared. But I said, well, if I'm going to do stuff for the check's clearing, you know, I'll do it at a tech company where the checks are a lot bigger, and still do my podcast and still do my writing. So I'm still keeping one toe in the creative world. But then I found the tech world was just as, you know, you made more money, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to badmouth any of the companies that I worked for.
Well, you were unfulfilled. Is that what you're trying to say? They didn't give you that deep creative.
No, I didn't care about the deep creative. I got the deep creative out of my podcast. I just didn't like the culture wasn't designed for me, and I wasn't designed for the culture.
Were they too civilianish? They were civilians after dealing with creatives. Were they too?
The idea of that I did anything creative like stand-up comedy was like, you know, they look at you and they start touching you like the Indians in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, when they all come up to Indiana Jones, I was touching him when he enters the village. So, you know, that's how they were. That's a very specific reference, but when they sort of looking at you like, oh, you did you appeared on TV, like, yeah, I did, and a lot of people I know have, and it's not that big a deal. Oh my God. But you know, I I'm doing more work with kids now. I'm doing more work in special ed and working with kids with Down syndrome and with autism and all sorts of different afflictions and stuff that you and I could probably never imagine what life is like, and not being able to talk or walk or anything. And obviously I'm doing that for the money. Obviously,
yeah, it pays well, doesn't it? People really put a lot of money into kids.
I'm doing it for the fame. I'm doing it for the groupies. No, I'm doing it because I discovered by a sheer fluke that I'm good at it. I think part of it is I'm a dad, so you have to have a lot of patience if you're a father. And I'm also, I'll just say I'm dealing a little bit with my own dad who's going through dementia.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my dad was my dad was my great friend. You know, I never had a falling out with my father, and he was the guy I watched baseball games, and we went to baseball trips all the time with. I got my extrovertedness I got from my father. My sort of positivity I got from my dad. With my dad, the glass wasn't half full; it was overflowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my humor from my mom. My mom has a very sharp and sometimes biting and sometimes dark sense of humor. But my mom and I, we're cut from the same cloth on a lot of things. But my dad and I look nothing like my father. I look exactly like my mom. But my dad and I are very similar personalities. And my dad was always was known as Big Kev, Kevin Sullivan. He was always Big Kev. And he wasn't a big man, like heavy or tall, and he just had this huge personality. And there'd be times he would take people that like Richie Duncan or Rob Terravonian out to dinner. Aww. And my dad would just hold court and just start talking, and everyone would just sort of listen to Big Kev Sullivan. And seeing him go through dementia is like that's the cruelest thing, that you have someone who was full of stories and memories and wanting to talk and hold court and remove his memories and remove that from him. It's
tragic.
It's
tragic.
Yeah, and because he's not dying.
Yeah.
He's not the person I was, and I've been dealing with my dad a lot, and that has helped me deal with kids with autism and deal with kids with Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It's nice that I'm doing this work and I'm getting my credential through Cal State Northridge. That there's this sense of what I'm doing is helping, is making my little corner of the world a little better. And instead of begging someone at the San Francisco Punchline to give me 5 minutes on a Wednesday, I'm using that energy to, little girl is having seizures and, making sure she's being cared for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would think it's more rewarding. You
can look in the mirror longer and say, what did you do today, Paul? Well, I wrote 2 new dick jokes and a Trump joke. Or, there are downsides. Let me put it this way. There's someday, when you work at special ed, and someday I'll write a one-man show about my first 2 years of special ed, because it's been a very interesting odyssey. And sometimes you work with these kids and you feel like, my God, I'm reaching out and making a connection to a child who is basically in darkness and is forgotten. And I'm giving that child dignity, and I'm giving that child love, and I'm giving that child care. You're doing that, Paul. Some days that's what it feels like. And some days you watch a child run to a urinal and start drinking from it like it's an oasis in the desert. And you're sitting there going like, holy God, that kid is putting his hands in the urinal, scooping up the water, and drinking it. What am I doing?
Bad teacher.
That same kid. I will not say his name. Let's call him. Let's call him A. A was a kid I saw drink out of the urinal. I also saw him eating cobwebs like Renfield and Dracula. He was eating goddamn cobwebs.
Why don't y'all feed that kid? Why don't y'all feed A? He's thirsty and hungry.
Oh no! Here's the thing. Lunchtime, he got the lunch from from public school up here in San Francisco, and his parents packed him like a thermos of something as well. and sat him down, he wouldn't touch it. He would not touch his lunch. And I kept looking at him saying, like, you can't tell me you're a picky eater, okay? You can't tell me you're finicky. I saw you drink out of a urinal. I saw you eat cobwebs. Have your grapes. Have your goddamn grapes. He wouldn't touch the grapes. He'd eat cobwebs, but not the grapes. It's not a very, very bad ad for the Grape Council. But, I found that there is a lack of people who want to work in special ed, and there is no lack of people who want to work in television.
True
and
that.
So, that there's a sense of your job and your effort being valued goes a long way. Goes a long, long way. And someday I'll write a book and a one-man show about this, and that will be the thing that makes me super famous and gets me celebrated. It's all a roundabout way. I need new material, so that's why I'm going to work with kids with Down syndrome. Yeah.
I'm sure it's very rewarding, though. That's a very specific population that needs extra attention and extra love.
Yeah, and I'll tell you where the nice thing is that sometimes, you can't. I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a specific story. One of the first times I did this, I didn't think I wanted to do this. I just was subbing because I needed to bring in some money.
Mm-hmm.
And the substitute agency was like, will you do special ed? And I said, I don't know if I can deal with special ed. What do I know about that? Plus, I'd have to diaper the kids sometimes. I don't want to do that. You do that. But then there were some days that, there's nothing available today except special ed. So I go, okay, oh God, I need to do it. And so I found I liked the kids better than the mainstream class, because the kids in the mainstream class were little shits. And the kids, not all of them, but enough of them were.
The majority.
And then the kids in the special ed were happy that someone was paying attention to them. So just that. But there was one day, it was in a school in San Mateo, which for those of you who don't know is about maybe 20 minutes south of San Francisco. And there was a boy there, and he's wheelchair bound his whole life. He's never going to be able to walk. And in fact, he has to have his food pumped directly into his stomach because he can't really chew. And he has like this bid because he can't really control his drooling reflex. And he can really only talk like one-word bursts. And so this kid is kind of in darkness because he's in his wheelchair. I'm sure a lot of times he's rolled to the corner and treated like a piece of furniture. And I was there and I was reading a book to him. And I was reading like Curious George or something to the kid. And the kid looked at this little boy. He must have been 9 or 10 years old. And the little boy looked at me, and he looked over at like this little basket where there was some toys there. And he said, ball. And there was like a little Nerf ball, a little Nerf basketball. And I put it in. I said, you want a ball? He said, ball. And I put it in his hand. And he was thrilled. And he didn't have enough control over his arm. So all he could do was move his wrist a little bit and kind of drop it. But I was pretending we were having a catch. Because this was a boy. He wanted to go out and play sports. He wanted to get a ball and play. He didn't want me to read it. He wanted to go outside and play. And throw a ball or a football or a basketball around. And the fact that I was doing this was like, I would put it in his hand. I would call him Bumgarner. And those who don't know, Madison Bumgarner is a star pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. So, come on, Bumgarner, throw it in here. And he would turn his wrist, the ball would fall, but I acted like he threw it to me. We did this for way too long. And I was only assigned to that school for one day. And then I got another assignment to go to somewhere else. And then like a week or two later, I got an assignment to go back to that school, to the same class. And I thought to myself, I wonder, did I make any impact? Did this kid remember me at all? And so I went out to meet the kid when they pulled the bus up. He was one of those buses that has the little elevator for the kids in the wheelchair, that they put them on the wheelchair and they lower them down.
Uh-huh.
And so I was standing there because my job was to get him from the bus stop and bring him to the classroom. And so I was standing there thinking, this kid's did I make any impact? This is like 2 weeks later. And the door opens, they wheel him out, and they put him on the elevator. And he sees me, and he has the biggest grin on his face and went, ball. And it took everything in my power to not start crying. I was physically had to stop myself from crying.
I'm trying not to cry right now, Paul.
I don't want to be the blubbering teacher, like, oh my God, what I'm doing matters, But, I did the whole, knuckle in my hand. I was, all right, and then I tried, come on, buddy, and I'm like, we have to go do our reading. They're like, we have exercises to do first, but at recess we'll get ball. I promise you we'll have ball. But so you have your curriculum you have to do. You're not just, chucking a ball around all day.
Right.
But that was the moment that I said, Paul, you should be doing this. This is what you should be doing. Stop begging tech companies to have you make videos so you can explain, enterprise cloud management. Stop begging reality shows whom you hate and you think gave us Trump as a president to be part of that culture. And stop worrying if your friends are more successful, have won more Emmys than you. This little boy is happier because of you. And that's when it wasn't even like a fade it was like a hard cut, to use a film term. It was like, nope, this is what I have to do. I can always write. I can always do my baseball. I still do my baseball podcast. Mm-hmm. And I produce a real crime podcast with my wife, which pays me money. And we have commercials and Quip and Casper matches and all that shit. But I need to do this because there are a lot of little kids like that who just need someone to put a Nerf ball in their hand because no one else will.
No, nobody else does. You're right about that. There's a lot of kids out there that don't get any attention, or they're getting negative attention when they go to school. They're isolated, they're ignored, they're mistreated because they're different. So what you're doing is phenomenal.
I tell you, there's this girl. Oh, I love this girl. I was doing it in San Francisco, a school I was working at. There was this little girl. She had Down syndrome. And the nice thing you find out is that there are kids who have these sort of afflictions, but they're also kids. I mean, it's not they can be bratty. You can, just because you have this issue going on with your brain doesn't mean you're an angelic Yoda who's teaching us wisdom of the world. Sometimes you can be a little shit, and once you learn that, it makes it so much easier because then you start interacting with them on that level. You interact with them as a child. I'm a parent. My kids are older. My kids are in high school now. So, but I remember when they were this age, and you got to deal with them. And I have sweet kids, but you have to be tough as a parent from time to time. And so you got to remember that. So, no, it's not all because you have Down syndrome. You're also being a brat. So, how much of it is what is the affliction and what is them being a brat? And there was this one girl, she wasn't a brat, but she was a diva. This little girl with Down syndrome was such a diva. And there was all sorts of sensory exercises that we would do with some toys, and sometimes with Play-Doh, sometimes with beads, sometimes with, dice and stuff like that. And whenever she got the Play-Doh, you were supposed to sort of create things or understand the difference between colors and shapes. And she would take little pieces of Play-Doh and put them on her fingernails and give her fingernail extensions with Play-Doh.
That's awesome.
And then would walk around, and she had a crush. She must have been 7, 8 years old, non-potty trained girl with Down syndrome who would come up to another boy in the class who also had Down syndrome and flirt with a dude all day long. And she would have their long Play-Doh fingernails and start to sashay past him and sort of do the sort of waving the fingers in his face. And I won't say the name, but I'll just say J, the letter J. But it's like, and she would just go, "Hi, Jay," and sort of do that. And that was one of the things, like, oh my God, she's trying to be a diva flirt with Play-Doh fingernails. And Jay would kind of give her a look back, like, I see you, but I'm not looking up from my dice game right now. have watched that whenever I was with them, and I was in that classroom for about 2 months. I could have been there all year if they would have had me. But yeah, that's it's funny to watch when they're doing the stuff like that. They're just kids.
Yeah,
they're kids. You gotta. There's some developmental issues, but in the end, they're kids, and that's I've helped raise 2 very loving, wonderful boys, and the thing that hit me. I'm sounding philosophical about this. I'll tell dick jokes later, but when I remember when Lisa, my wife, was pregnant with my twin boys, people would say, "Are they going to be boys? Are they going to be girls?" And then the standard thing to say in response is, "It doesn't matter as long as they're healthy." Almost always what you say, "I don't care if it's a boy or a girl, as long as the child is healthy." The kids that I'm working with are the ones who didn't turn out healthy. This is like what people say, as long as this doesn't happen to you, it doesn't matter if it's a boy or girl, as long as they're not this. That's the implication. And so I'm dealing with, think about these parents. These are kids who are not going to grow up and go to UCLA or Stanford. These are not kids who are going to grow up and work at Hewlett-Packard or become lawyers or truck drivers or whatever. They're probably going to be at home their whole lives and become wards of the state eventually. And like, I look at my kids, I know they're going to go to college. I know they're going to wind up getting good jobs. They're smart. They're getting straight A's. They're a hell of a lot smarter than me. But think about these parents who have this burden their entire lives. And so at least for the hours that they're with us, we're not just helping these kids, we're helping these families. We're giving them a chance to live their life, whether it's at their work or to live their life or do whatever. Mm-hmm. And to know that they're, your child who has to go through, I can't fathom what they're going through. I cannot, it was hard enough raising 2 kids that this isn't an issue with. So you look at that and say, what if we give these families a little hope and a little peace as well?
Mm-hmm. It's important.
And I'm not a believer of anything. I'm not a religious person. I'm probably I'm an atheist heathen and everything like that. And I believe that we have to live our lives that we, I think this is our only life. So whether a life is worth living is based on how many good connections have you made? Have you made the experience of life better for people as opposed to making it worse? And I believe in an afterlife. The afterlife is the effect your life has after you're gone. Like, my grandmother had a tremendous impact on a lot of people. She's been gone since 1990, but her impact is still felt. That's her afterlife. And so if everyone just says, okay, here's my corner. Here's my little corner of the world. I'm going to work to make that better than how I found it. If everyone did that, the world would be a better place. And so this is me doing it, is picking my corner and saying, all right, I'm going to try and make this thing a little better. And who knows, maybe that will allow someone else to do their corner better. And yeah, it's all connections, and people feel happy. And eventually, I'm not calling up comedians saying, I'm sorry I tried to kiss you one night. Instead, I'm doing something a little better with my life. So yeah, I didn't know I was getting so, I thought you and I were talking about like us doing shitty shows. I didn't know I was going to tell the story about the little boy throwing the ball in a special ed class in San Mateo. But yeah, that's where my life is now.
Well, I'm glad you were here to share that story, and I'm glad for all the other stories that we have that we didn't share today, because we did have a lot of fun. It was a very different time, and it sounds like you're on a much more rewarding path for right now.
Well, it's the path that I should be on now. Who knows, in 5-10 years, who knows where my path will be?
Right.
If you told me I was going to be, if you went back in time to just this December and said you're going to be working, this is what you're going to be doing, I would have thought you were crazy.
It's really crazy. It's really crazy, Paul. People listening who had no idea that stand-up comedians substitute teach now know that their children are being educated sometimes in certain regions of the country by people who tell dick jokes all night long.
My stand-up background and the improv training I got at Chicago City Limits has been invaluable in working in classrooms. Getting up, like half the time it's about getting up in front of an audience. You and I have performed in front of drunks. You and I have performed in front of hecklers. I've now performed in front of kids in wheelchairs and with Down syndrome and having seizures. Okay? It's all the same.
You just have to maintain control.
you think you got heckled by drunks. Imagine getting heckled by a kid, a bipolar kid on the autistic spectrum, okay? That's heckling, okay? I had one kid who, no matter what I said, would just grill me on every Disney film ever made. You know, I was Mr. Paul, and I said, Mr. Paul, did you see Dumbo? Did you see Dumbo? We're in the middle of a lesson right now. We're in a little bit of a lesson right now. So, who knows what number this is? Mr. Paul, did you see Dumbo? Did you see Dumbo? Did you see Dumbo? Did you see Aladdin? Did you see Aladdin? Did you see Little Mermaid? You think Little Mermaid? Do you think Jasmine is pretty? Like, you know, it's like, you know, having an improv background helps. Mm-hmm. Having performing background helps. And I actually told one of the other special ed teachers, who was this woman has been doing it for years and was like my Yoda, because I was watching her. But I'll tell you this quick story about her. I told her to take improv classes because I think it would help with her teaching. But I want to tell you, this is sometimes the frustration of this. There's a little boy, we'll just call him P, in my class, and he was on a lot of medication because he had lots of seizures and did a lot of things like hitting himself and biting and stuff like that. Mm. And there was one day, it was about 95 degrees and broiling in San Mateo. And he is basically dressed like the Shackleton expedition to Antarctica. I mean, like he has a gigantic jacket on and a fur hat, and he was a trapper. He had pelts with him. You know, he was like the Revenant sitting there in the middle of the class. And I'm looking at him going like, and I'm sweating looking at him. But I also see that, you know, the medication's kicking in, and his face, he's like drooling on the desk. And I'm going like, I said, Pete, just take your jacket off, please. And I try to take it off myself. He goes, yeah, and he swats at me. And I'm there for, it feels like an hour and a half. And I'm trying everything. I'm saying like, hey, why don't you take your jacket off now? Hey, let's play a game. Who wants to take your jacket off? You've got to take your jacket off right now. Please take your jacket. Every way I could say it. And this woman who's the experienced special ed teacher walks by my classroom, and she's about 3'2" and had a hat that was about 12 feet in diameter. I mean, her hat was bigger than her. And she walks into the classroom, and she just stands next to his desk and says, take off your coat. And without blinking, the kid takes the coat off. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and she said, years of experience. And I said, but I swear, if you looked at the transcript, I said that at one point. But, you know, it was a total Jedi mind trick from her. She just came in, like, no matter what I did, I had everything but a hat and cane and a monkey with an organ grinder to get this kid to take his goddamn jacket off. And she comes in with this hat that looks like a flying saucer, and she just sort of floats in. She just floats in like she's. The feet don't even touch the ground. Floats in. Take your jacket off. Takes it off. I'm like, well, there you go. And I said, I guess I'll learn how to do that once I finish my credential program.
Yeah, once you have your certification, and they'll give you a hat, maybe that'll help.
Maybe that's it. Maybe, yeah, because she was like Maggie Smith in the Harry Potter film. She has a big-ass hat that coming in, and maybe I'll put the hat on and it starts talking, like on you're and Hufflepuff or whatever that shit is. So, I never was a Harry Potter dude. But that's I saw the first Harry Potter film when it came out in 2000 or 2001, and without reading the books. And I used to talk about it on stage. I felt like I was at someone else's high school reunion because everyone, no matter what, a character would walk on stage and say, my name's Ron Weasley, and the place would start erupting in applause like he hit a home run. And I said, I don't know who you are, Ron Weasley, but apparently everyone knows you here. And like, I didn't know what the hell was happening in the entire movie. I didn't see any of the other ones because I was like, Nope. I guess I need to read everything before seeing this.
No,
But
dude, I can't watch those films. I've tried. They always put me to sleep.
yeah, yeah. My kids like them okay. Oh, it's the best part about when my kids get older, because when they're younger, you're watching all that Thomas the Tank Engine stuff, and you got to memorize all the trains, and you're watching this kid show or that kid show, and you're like, I don't want to be watching this right now. And then when they get older and they start liking the movies that I liked when they were their age,
Mm-hmm.
and so my kids come up to me and say, Dad, can we watch Ghostbusters? Yes! Dad, can we watch the Michael Keaton Batman? Of course! We're watching it now! Their favorite movie of all time is Jurassic Park, and I'm happy to watch Jurassic Park at a drop of a hat, And whenever I show them a film, one of my favorite movies, like they love Monty Python and the Holy Grail. They love Jaws. They love Back to the Future. They love the Rocky movies. And it's like makes all that Thomas the Tank Engine time worth it. That now we can, they don't watch baseball at all. I'll give a plug. I host a baseball podcast called Locked On MLB, but they don't care about baseball at the slightest. But they watch all the shows I grew up with and all the movies I grew up with. So, all things considered, that's, we'll sit and watch Godzilla films from the 60s, like the really, goofy ones where it's dudes, Japanese dudes in rubber suits, basically doing sumo wrestling against dinosaurs that I used to watch as a kid, and they love them. They love them, and I'm like, this is great. I'm watching old Godzilla films with my kids. This is perfect. I'm a good father.
It's like payback for the 17,000 times you had to watch Cars, that movie. They didn't. I was very fortunate that the Pixar film that they really loved was Toy Story. Oh,
and
nice.
And Toy Story to me is like The Wizard of Oz. That's just a classic film that will age, that will never age. It's just perfect. So I got lucky that they could have been big Cars kids, but they gravitated towards Toy Story. So I had no problem with watching Toy Story over and over again. But it was some of the other, I said, like the Thomas Trains,
Oh yeah.
those
Familiar.
We watched those a lot, and I got to know every. In fact, if you look at my LinkedIn page, one of my skills is I can name every train on the island of Sodor. And then they started making episodes based upon the toys, like selling fucking toys.
Right.
So, like, every other episode is, there's a new train on the island of Sodor named Lou or whatever it is. Like, hey, what happened to the 50 other ones I've already bought? What happened to him? Can we get back to Toby the Tram or maybe Gordon on the Express line? Why do we need to see a train called Scarloey or Fearless Freddy? Who the hell is Fearless Freddy? And immediately they watch the kids go, we got Fearless Freddy. God damn it, I have to find Fearless Freddy now. And you can look it up. I'm actually not making that up. The name of one of the trains was Fearless Freddy. And I remember it because it was on a fucking episode, but I also remember because at the end of the episode, one of my sons said to me, can we get a Fearless Freddy? I said, oh my God, they've hooked my children. This is worse than heroin. And then when they finally outgrew Thomas, I'm like, Jesus, what am I going to do with all this knowledge? Like, I could navigate. You know how, like, you've lived in New York forever, and you know how to get on the N line or the 1 line, and you know how to navigate the trains to get wherever the hell you want to go to. If you plop me on the island of Sodor, I go, okay, I got to take Gordon to this line, switch over to Tom's, and don't take James late at night. There's a creepy dude on the platform there. You don't want to take James. What you got to do is you got to wait for Toby the Tram, and then you hook over to Thomas's line. And I could get all the way up to the mountains. That's where Henry is up there near his tunnel. And so, okay, got to cut through there, and I can get through. I can take you all through Sodor and the transit system there. Stand clear of Thomas's sliding doors. I can do that just fine.
Well, your kids are lucky to have you. All your kids are lucky.
They're all my kids now. They're all my young kids.
Well, I wish you the best of it. So where do we find you? I know you've got 2 podcasts. Where do we find those?
Okay, the podcast that I produce that I'm not on, that I produce, is called Real Crime Profile. That's a show that features an FBI agent and a Scotland Yard agent, and the host is a connection through casting Criminal Minds. and they do roundtables on cases. It's very violent, and if you like violence and breaking down crimes, we have a wonderful following, and it's great. And it's part of the Wondery Podcast Network. And then if you want to hear my voice, I talk baseball. I'm a rabid baseball fan, and I talk baseball about every team on a show called Lockdown MLB, which is on 5 days a week. And
Wow.
I did my old podcast, Sully Baseball. I did 1,400 consecutive days where I didn't miss a day. And I talked baseball for over 4 years. That I just every single day, even Christmas, even when I had my kidney stone, I did a podcast every day. And then eventually, I had to stop that because it just became too much. But
You
but now
think? That's a lot. Yeah.
But then the Lockdown Podcast Network offered me a couple of bucks to do their 5 day a week show. So I said, okay, I can do that, and I have fun, and we talk about baseball, but my humor, my personality, it's not me going like, okay, then he got an RBI, and for that he needed to not steal the base in the fourth. No, I try to make it fun, like you're sitting with a friend watching a game and the kind of banter that would happen. And we have a nice little following. So that's Locked On MLB, which is on all your platforms. If you just want to follow me, I have links to all this stuff on Twitter at Sully Baseball. I'm on Twitter. In fact, I just opened my Twitter handle now because I'm an addict. I'm on Twitter a lot. I don't use a lot of the other social media, but I do use Twitter a lot. So if you want to get a hold of me or watch any of the stuff I've done or seen any things or just see some of the goofy stuff that I type out every once in a while, yeah, that's where you can do it.
Well, I will continue to follow you. I enjoy you very much. I've never listened to your podcast on baseball because I'm not really into athletics, but I will check that out too because I think you're fantastic.
Well, I think you're fantastic, and I've been a fan of yours. I was on the Lisa Landry bandwagon before it was cool. I remember when you were, I mean, I'm older than you by a few years, but you were this young, really energetic, just like you were very raw. Like you're a lot more, you know, your material and everything like that has been honed, and you're a much more polished comedian now. But I just remember even in the beginning when none of us knew what the hell we were doing. I'm sure if I watched this stuff, none of us really, we were just figuring it out. And you could tell who has the energy and the presence on stage and I don't want to say the likability because I just think there's so much baggage with that term, but I think there's just a magnetism that you had even while you were developing your act that you could just tell, ooh, there's something special about Lisa Landry. And I could tell that I knew that in 98, 99 when we first met at the getting free glasses of Diet Coke at 4:30 in the afternoon at the Gotham Comedy Club in between lunatics and potential rapists going on stage. Let me tell you, Lisa, as opposed to the people who just got out of Bellevue or are having to go from door to door as a sexual predator, I liked you the most.
You had a tight three that didn't threaten me.
Yes, I didn't feel like I needed to take a shower after you were on stage. So, by the way, Lisa then had very full, not as straight hair, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's a lot straighter these days, and it was a lot more. There was a flowingness to your hair, if I remember correctly, back in the late '90s.
It's all that New York City humidity, bruh.
Oh yeah. I'm just glad I still have my hair. That's why some of my friends are going bald. I'm so glad I'm not going bald. Not yet, at least. So there you go.
Well, knock wood. Sully, I think the world of you, and I'm so happy you would come by and speak with me and my listeners, and it's good to catch up with you, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Thanks for what you're doing, too. You're making a difference, on a personal level.
Thank you. And you just keep being... I love your podcast. I'm on this, as I said, because I said I always subscribe to my friends' podcasts. I subscribe to yours, and I just started binge listening. And I went, oh, this is great. I love it. So there you go.
Thank you very much. All right, let's keep in touch. Come back and talk to me and my guests in the future.
All right, you got it.
All right, cool. Thanks, Paul. Sully!
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all, for listening. Please come back to next Womanist Wednesday. You can find me on my website, lisalandry.com. Shout out Ari. I love you, little boo-boo.